Oak Island is small, 140 acres of spruce and swamp off Nova Scotia, small enough to walk across in an afternoon. For over 200 years, some of the wealthiest people on Earth have poured fortunes into a hole in the ground here, chasing a mystery that has never paid off. Today we're walking through 10 of the strangest things ever pulled out of that ground. A coin bearing a 17th century king, buried a century before anyone was supposed to be here. Tropical coconut fiber packed under a freezing Atlantic beach by hands nobody can identify. A pit that floods itself over and over like the ground is defending something. Stick around for number 1. That one isn't really about treasure. It's about the 6 people this island has already killed, and the 7th, the old legend says, is still owed. This is where we dig into the strangest, most stubborn mysteries history left behind. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's a good time. We post stories like this every week. Today we're counting down 10 of the strangest discoveries ever made on Oak Island. Let's get into it. Number 10. The presidents and movie stars who couldn't let go. Or what happens when the rich and famous find something money can't fix. In 1909, a 27-year-old joined a treasure syndicate called the Old Gold Salvage Group and picked up a shovel on Oak Island. His name was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He would go on to lead the United States through the Great Depression and a World War, and through all of it, he kept tabs on this island. He planned a visit for 1939. The Second World War got in the way. Roosevelt wasn't the only one who couldn't leave it alone. Errol Flynn put money in, so did John Wayne. Wealthy men with no shortage of better ways to spend an afternoon kept choosing this one instead. None of them found anything. That's the pattern here. It isn't that no one has looked. Everyone who could afford to look has. The modern chapter belongs to 2 brothers from Michigan, Rick and Marty Lagina, who bought a controlling stake in the island in 2006 and have been digging on camera ever since. You can still get to Oak Island today. A causeway, built in 1965, connects it to the mainland at Crandall's Point. In Roosevelt's day, it was a boat across Mahone Bay. A man who ran the free world through a depression and a war still made time to worry about a hole in the ground in Nova Scotia. Make of that what you will. Number 9. Nolan's Cross, or the shape you can only see once you stop looking at the ground and start looking at a map. A surveyor named Fred Nolan spent decades walking every corner of Oak Island, measuring lot lines, cataloging stones. At some point, he noticed something the ground itself couldn't tell you. 6 enormous boulders scattered across the island in what looked like nothing in particular, actually lined up. Mapped together, they form a cross, 360 feet wide, 867 feet tall. Here's the thing. You cannot see this from inside it. Stand next to any one of these boulders and it is just a rock in the woods. The shape only exists from above, on paper, in the abstract. Whoever put it there, if anyone did, built something meant to be understood by people who would never stand where it stands. One of the 6, the stone nearest the center, has been described as having a rough, almost human profile, though that may say more about how badly people want this island to mean something than about the rock itself. Nolan believed the cross was deliberate, laid out by whoever built the original works on this island as a marker tied to whatever they were protecting. Skeptics point out that glaciers scatter large boulders across landscapes like this one constantly, and that 6 points isn't very many to force into a pattern if you already want the pattern to be there. Getting to any one of these stones isn't a walk down a paved path. It's an overland trek across uneven, root-tangled ground through forest clearings that give way to swamp without much warning. There's no signage out here, no marked trail. Just wind moving through spruce and the sound of your own boots sinking into wet earth, looking for a rock that only means something once you already know where 5 others are. The boulders are still exactly where Nolan found them, sitting in the moss and the wet ground, doing absolutely nothing to explain themselves. Nobody has moved them. Nobody has explained them either. Number 8, the coins that are older than the hunt itself. The official story is simple. Nobody was on Oak Island until 1795 when a teenager stumbled across a depression in the ground by accident. It's a clean story. It's also, according to what's actually been dug up, not entirely true. The coins disagree. Searchers have pulled up an 8 maravedis, a small Spanish copper coin from the 1600s. They found two coins bearing the face of King Charles II, also minted in the 1600s, more than 100 years before a teenager supposedly stumbled onto this place by accident. That doesn't require a buried treasure to explain. Oak Island sits on a busy stretch of Atlantic coastline, the kind of place ships would have passed, anchored near, maybe even used, for 2 centuries before anyone wrote the story down. What the coins do prove is that the tidy version of events, empty island, chance discovery, 1795, was never the whole truth. Here's the detail that stops people cold. A coin bearing the face of a 17th century English king, sitting in dirt on an island where, officially, nothing was happening yet. Most of these turn up the same way. A detectorist walking a shoreline lot, headphones on, the tone rising in pitch as the coil passes over metal buried a few inches down. Then the trowel, scraping soil back one careful layer at a time until a corroded disc of copper or silver comes up in someone's palm. None of this requires a vault full of gold to be sitting somewhere on the island. It just means the neat version of events, the one where an empty island sat untouched for centuries until one lucky boy found it, was never quite accurate. People were here, they spent money here, or lost it here, long before anyone thought to write it down. The coins are cataloged now, kept by the search team, and the shoreline where they turned up still gets swept most seasons. Every one of them says the same thing. Somebody got here first and didn't leave a note explaining why. Number 7. The lead cross, or how one small object built an entire theory. Not everything that has kept this mystery alive for 2 centuries is dramatic on its own. Some of it is small enough to fit in a pocket. It's not large, this one. You could close your hand around it entirely. A metal detector picked it up during a routine sweep, and once the team cleaned off 2 centuries of corrosion, they had a lead cross whose design matched patterns found on 16th century Portuguese and Spanish artifacts an ocean away. From there, given how badly this story wants a religious order behind it, the theory practically writes itself. A cross like this old, this specific, surely it points to the Knights Templar, to some medieval order with a reason to hide something valuable on a remote Canadian island. The show has leaned into that reading hard, and it makes for a good story. It's worth being honest about what the object actually proves. Lead crosses in this general style were not rare in that era. Consistent with a design found elsewhere is not the same as proof of who buried it or why. The cross is real. Everything built on top of it is interpretation. You can watch the moment it gets analyzed if you've seen the show. Hushed voices in a lab, a camera shutter clicking away, side-by-side comparisons with old European carvings pulled up on a screen. It's a small object, treated with the reverence usually reserved for something much larger, and that gap between the size of the artifact and the size of the theory built around it is worth noticing. Still, it sits under careful lighting now, cataloged as one of the most significant single finds of the modern search, not because anyone has proven what it means, but because a small object like this is exactly the kind of thing that keeps a 200-year-old story alive. Number 6. The wood that shouldn't be there. Drain a swamp and you expect mud, roots, maybe a few old bottles. What the team found underneath Oak Island Swamp was something else. Wood. Worked, shaped, deliberately placed wood, sitting in ground that had supposedly never been touched before 1795, layered in like it had been put there on purpose by someone who knew exactly what they were building. Some of it has been carbon dated to the 1600s. One beam, pulled up during a recent season, had a Roman numeral carved into it. A 3, like it was once part of something numbered, something larger that hasn't turned up yet. A stone wharf buried in the same swamp has been assessed at roughly 300 years old. None of this proves treasure. 2 centuries of documented salvage work, plus whatever ordinary industry passed through this island over the years, could account for aged timber turning up in the ground. What it does prove is that people were here, building things, long before the story the island tells about itself begins. The work itself looks nothing like archaeology. It looks like heavy industry. Excavators grinding across dewatered bog, black mud sucking at every step, pumps running around the clock just to keep the water low enough to dig at all. What comes up out of that mud isn't gold. It's blackened timber, some of it still holding its shape after 400 years underground, laid out carefully on tarps to be measured, photographed, sampled, and sent off for dating before anyone can guess what it was actually for. The swamp is still being worked, the timber's still logged and argued over, season after season. Every numbered beam raises the same question nobody has answered. Numbered as part of what? A staircase, a platform, a foundation for something much bigger, still buried, still waiting for beam number 1, 2, and everything after 3. If you're finding this rabbit hole as strange as we did putting it together, drop a thumbs up and tell us in the comments which of these artifacts you find hardest to explain away. The coins, the cross, or that numbered beam. We read every one. We're only halfway through this list, and it gets heavier from here. What's coming involves a stone that conveniently no longer exists, a beach packed with coconuts 1,500 miles from home, and a curse that has already claimed 6 lives. Number 5, the inscribed stone, or the one piece of evidence that would have settled everything if it still existed. In the early 1800s, a company called Onslow was digging deeper into the money pit than anyone before them. Somewhere around 90 feet down, by candlelight, with water already seeping in at the edges of the shaft, the diggers said they found something. A flat stone, cut square, covered in strange symbols cut into its face. They carried it up out of the dark and brought it to a language professor at Dalhousie University, a man named James Leachy, and asked him to make sense of the carving. He came back with a translation that would launch 2 centuries of obsession. 40 feet below, 2 million pounds are buried. Here's the wild part. Leachy wasn't a neutral expert brought in from outside. He was a member of the Onslow Company himself, the same company that needed investors to keep the money in the digging coming. A professor with a financial stake in people believing there was treasure 40 feet down just happened to translate the stone that way. And then the stone vanished. It passed hand to hand over the following decades and simply stopped being seen sometime between the 1860s and the early 1900s. No lab today can test it. No independent expert can check the symbols, the translation, or whether the whole thing was carved to deceive from the very beginning. Think about what that means for 200 years of searchers who came after. Every treasure hunter who has ever stood at the money pit has been chasing a number, 40 feet, that comes from a man who profited from people believing it. Not a scientist, not a neutral historian, a shareholder. And the one object that could settle the question, prove the cipher real, or expose it as fabrication, is gone. What survives are a handful of sketches, some contradictory secondhand accounts, and 2 centuries of people building on top of a claim nobody alive can check. What's left now is a promise nobody can verify. It is the single most tempting piece of evidence in the entire Oak Island story, and it may also be the piece most likely to have been manufactured to sell shares in a failing company. Both of those things can be true at the same time. Nothing physical remains. Just the story of a stone that once said exactly what everyone wanted to hear, and disappeared before anyone unbiased ever got to check its work. Number 4, the coconut fiber, or the detail that even the skeptics struggle to explain away. Smith's Cove is a cold, gray stretch of beach on the north side of Oak Island, the kind of coastline that gets battered by Atlantic tides twice a day. In 1851, searchers digging into that beach hit a thick layer of fibrous material packed into the ground beneath it. It didn't look like anything native to Nova Scotia. It looked and turned out to be coconut husk. A sample was sent to the Smithsonian Institution, which confirmed it in plain terms. Coconut fiber, the genuine article, not a look-alike, not a misidentification. The nearest coconut palm grows roughly 1,500 miles from where that fiber was sitting. Coconuts do not wash up on Nova Scotia beaches and bury themselves 3 feet down on their own. Someone brought this material here, deliberately, in bulk. The leading theory is engineering, not decoration. Coconut fiber makes an excellent filter layer, porous enough to let water through, dense enough to keep out sediment. If you wanted a system that lets seawater flood into a shaft further inland while filtering out the debris that would otherwise clog it, this is roughly what you would use. The show has dated a sample to somewhere between 1260 and 1400, centuries before 1795, though that figure comes from the program itself and hasn't been independently confirmed the way the Smithsonian identification has. What makes this one different from the coins, the cross, even the inscribed stone, is that there's no professor with a financial stake standing behind it. No lost object nobody can re-examine. The fiber is real. The Smithsonian said so back when there was no television show, no branded merchandise, no reason to want the answer to be exciting. It is one of the few facts in this entire story that is very hard to argue with, and very hard to explain with anything ordinary. Smith's Cove still floods twice a day, right on schedule with the tide, which means every excavation here is a fight against the clock as much as the ground. You can hear it before you see it. Surf coming in over the flats, gulls working the tide line, and underneath all of that, pumps running constantly just to hold the water back long enough to dig. And every season they find a little more of it. Tropical fiber, packed into an Atlantic Canadian beach by someone who wanted it there for reasons nobody alive today can name. Number 3, the flood tunnels, or the reason nobody has ever actually reached the bottom of the money pit. Every treasure hunt eventually runs into something it can't get past. On Oak Island, that something isn't a locked door or a collapsed passage. It's water. Pump the shaft dry and the sea comes back. Every time, without exception, for over 200 years. That has been the single most consistent feature of this entire dig, not a discovery, but a defeat, repeating itself right on schedule. The going theory is a tunnel, roughly 500 feet long, running underground from Smith's Cove all the way to the money pit, acting like a siphon built by someone with real engineering knowledge and a lot of time. One 19th century account describes hitting a flood tunnel lined with flat stones at around 90 feet. If true, it means whoever built this didn't just dig a hole. They built a defense system, one triggered automatically the moment someone digs deep enough to threaten whatever is down there. It's worth saying plainly, in the interest of not overselling this, that not everyone agrees it's engineered at all. A geologist named Robert Dunfield examined the re-excavated pit walls decades ago and reported finding no evidence of any man-made tunnel at all. His argument, and the argument of others since, is that Oak Island sits on soluble bedrock, the kind that naturally lets seawater seep through cracks and channels underground. Under that reading, the island isn't defending a treasure. It's just doing what porous limestone does near an ocean. Both explanations are still on the table. What isn't in dispute is the water itself. Diesel pumps running around the clock, roaring for hours, drawing the shaft down foot by foot, and then the moment, filmed again and again across 13 seasons, where the level simply stops falling and starts climbing back up. Whatever is happening down there, it happens fast, and it happens every single time anyone gets close. Stand at the edge of that shaft while it's happening and there isn't much to see. Muddy, churning water, filling in a hole that engineers and geologists have spent 2 centuries trying to outsmart. You can engineer a trap, or you can just be standing on ground that was never going to let you in, no matter who built what. Either way, the ocean has won every round so far. Number 2, the money pit itself, or 230 years spent chasing a hole. Every entry on this list eventually leads back here. The coins, the cross, the numbered beam, the coconut fiber, the water that won't stop rising, all of it circles the same patch of ground. In 1795, a teenager named Daniel McGinnis was walking across Oak Island and noticed a circular depression in the ground. He started digging with a couple of friends. 10 feet down, they hit a layer of flagstones. Deeper still, wooden platforms spaced roughly every 10 feet, one after another, as if someone had built a structure meant to keep whoever found it digging. The boys gave up at 30 feet, exhausted and out of ideas. Word got around anyway, the way it does in small communities, and in 1803 a company called Onslow arrived with real money and equipment to go deeper than 3 teenagers ever could. They found more of the same: platforms, layers of charcoal, putty, eelgrass, coconut fiber, each one a fresh reason to believe the next 10 feet held the answer. It never did. Company after company took over the search for 2 centuries. Fortunes were spent. Heavy machinery eventually replaced shovels. And after 230 years, nobody has found a confirmed treasure. Not gold, not a vault, nothing. There's a less romantic explanation, and it deserves to be said just as clearly as the exciting one, because credibility matters more than a good story. Geologists have argued the original pit may simply be a natural sinkhole, the kind Nova Scotia's limestone landscape produces on its own, with the layered material inside explained by ordinary decay and old industrial use rather than deliberate design. Under that reading, 2 centuries of digging chased a shape the ground made by accident, and people filled in the rest with meaning. Even the location has become uncertain. A chaotic excavation in the 1960s collapsed so many nearby shafts that nobody today is entirely sure where the original 1795 pit actually was. The team now digs in the general area, using steel caissons sunk deep into churned, cratered ground, racing the calendar every year because Nova Scotia's winter shuts the whole operation down. What you'd see on site today is diesel engines, groaning steel casings, water everywhere. It looks like an industrial job site. It does not look like buried treasure. 230 years, an unknown amount of money, and the most honest thing anyone can say about the money pit is that it might just be a hole. That hasn't stopped anyone from digging it deeper. Number 1, the curse, or 6 people are already dead, and the story says there's one more to go. Picture a narrow shaft cut into cold ground, water already pooling at the bottom before you're even halfway down. No sound except your own boots on wet wood, and somewhere below you, a smell that isn't quite right. Gas, maybe, sitting in air that hasn't moved in a long time. This is what it has looked like every time this island has taken a life. Not fire, not violence, just a hole, an air that turned out to be waiting for someone. The legend itself is about 100 years old, and nobody, not even the people who repeat it every season, can say exactly where it started. 7 people must die before Oak Island gives up its treasure. It sounds like the kind of thing a producer would invent for a cold open. It isn't. 6 people really have died here, and the deaths are documented, one at a time, across more than a century of digging. The first came in 1861 when a pump engine's boiler burst during an excavation, killing a worker whose name history barely bothered to record. More followed over the decades, in cave-ins, in accidents with heavy equipment, in a landscape where cold, wet conditions make everything underground more dangerous than it looks from the surface. But the death that defines the legend happened in 1965. A treasure hunter named Robert Restall was working in a shaft when he collapsed, likely overcome by gas that had built up in the confined space. His son went down after him. 2 other men followed, trying to help. All 4 died within minutes of each other, in the same hole, on the same afternoon, in a shaft none of them should have gone back into. That brings the count to 6, at least by the number the show itself uses on screen, though other estimates counting more loosely run as high as 14. 6 is enough. 6 means the legend only needs one more name to complete itself, and that math is exactly why nobody who works this island can fully shake the feeling that something is owed. Think about what it takes to keep digging with that number sitting in the back of your mind. Every season, the current team goes back down into shafts where 4 men died within minutes of each other, where the water has already proven it can rise faster than anyone can climb, and they do it anyway, on camera, year after year. Whatever you think of the treasure, that's a kind of nerve worth acknowledging on its own. A curse like this doesn't require anyone to believe in anything supernatural to feel its weight. The danger on Oak Island isn't a story. It's confined spaces, unstable ground, and water that fills a shaft the moment you're not looking. 6 real men found that out the hard way, and their names are the only part of this entire 230-year mystery that nobody disputes. No treasure has ever been confirmed on Oak Island. Not the gold, not the vault, not whatever the coconut fiber in the flood tunnels and the inscribed stone were protecting, if they were protecting anything at all. What is confirmed is 6 graves, one legend that says there needs to be a 7th, and a team that keeps digging anyway. Maybe that's the real discovery here. Not treasure. Just how far people will go, generation after generation, for something that has never once paid off and never once given them a reason to stop. Oak Island has swallowed fortunes, decades, and belief for 230 years without ever giving up a single confirmed answer. For me, it's the coconut fiber, packed into a freezing beach by hands nobody can name. That's the one that stays with me. Which of these 10 surprised you most? Tell us below. And if forgotten places and unsolved mysteries are your kind of rabbit hole, subscribe. We post one every week.